Thank you, candidates, for coming to our beautiful city of Miramar. Before we begin, I would like to introduce our Vice Mayor, Ms. Yvette Colborn.
Thank you all very much. Hello, everyone. I am Vice Mayor Yvette Colborn from the City of Miramar. I would like to acknowledge here with me Commissioner Maxwell Chambers, and I know I do expect our mayor to come by, Mayor Wayne Messam, as well as Commissioner Alexander Davis, who will be coming by again this evening, as well this evening. On behalf of the City of Miramar Commission, I welcome you here, and I thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being on time. I know that it's crucial during this time. You have a lot to do. You're juggling a lot, but you're here tonight, and that's meaningful. So thank you for that. I had the pleasure of knowing late Congressman Alcee Hastings. I know his shoes is a very big one to fill, and I want to commend each and every one of you for seeking to do so and to represent us. So with that, I wish you all well this evening, and I'd like to also say thank you to the National Coalition of 100 Black Women from South Palm Beach chapter for having this here today and allowing me to partner with them on it. So good luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Hey, candidates. Let's go over some information before we begin. I'm going to introduce my chair of public policy, Ms. Desiree Jackson. I'm Tennille. I am the chair of political forums, the best chair ever, best organization. So you're on a timer. We'll have a couple of questions. We're going to start from my right going to the left. You have 1 minute for an introduction, 2 minutes to answer a question, and 1 minute for a closing. And if we have time, we'll take questions from the audience. Everybody understand? When you have 30 seconds, you'll see the light in front of you turn yellow. Desiree also has a sign. She'll hold up the 30-second mark. And then when it's red, that means your time is up. So please don't go over. All right, so starting with Barbara Sharif. Please introduce yourself and why you are running for Congress.
I'm Dr. Barbara Sharif, and I am a doctor of nursing practice, 28 years in the healthcare profession. I've been in elected office for 13 years, 2 of which I served here in the city of Miramar, 1 as city commissioner, 1 as vice mayor. The last 11 years, I've been on the county commission serving District 8, which Miramar is my district. And I've had the privilege of serving twice as Broward County's first African-American female mayor in its 100-year history. I've also been elected statewide as the president of the Florida Association of Counties. And I had the privilege of being the first and only African-American female to ever serve in that capacity in its 84-year history. One of the things that I did as president of the Florida Association of Counties is go to Washington, D.C. to lobby on issues that were important to our community, like health care, clean water, and criminal justice reform. And I'm going to stop because I see my minute is up. Thank you.
Before you begin, Sheila, I failed to recognize somebody in the audience. We have the president of Broward County Black Caucus, Robin, here as well. Sorry about that. You can begin.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm Sheila Sherfilis McCormick, and I'm excited to be giving this debate here right in my home. I've been a Miramar resident since I was 13. I am the CEO of Trinity Healthcare, which has been based in Miramar for over 30 years. For the last 15, I've been CEO. I've been lobbying and advocating in DC to help small businesses, especially home health aides and CNAs, and employees actually get better rates and raises. In addition to that, we've really been pushing an initiative to help small business owners to acquire federal contracts. In that capacity, I helped more than 3 businesses acquire more than 10 million. We were one of the frontliners and one of the largest women-owned businesses that was doing Joe Biden's vaccination project throughout the whole state of Florida. In that capacity, we also helped small businesses come on board. But most importantly, we created over 1,200 jobs throughout the entire state, and no one was getting paid less than $20 an hour. I'm running for Congress because it's time for us to have someone in Congress who understands how to create jobs, economic justice, and also who can bring us forward. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Reverend Elvin J. Dowling. I am a proud resident of the great city of Miramar, but I grew up on the corner of Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard and Tamarind Avenue in West Palm Beach, Florida. In the few moments that I have with you, I just want to tell you something that I think is important that you know about me. The first and most important thing I want you to know is that I love the Lord. The second thing I want you to know is that I'm not willing to sell my soul or to sell you a bag of goods to get elected to Congress. I have spent my life serving real people in a real way, and I will continue to do so if you give me the privilege of serving. I've had the opportunity to be nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. This year I had the privilege of winning 6 International Book Awards. But at the end of the day, this election isn't about me, it's about you. It's about your hopes, it's about your dreams, it's about the future for your children. And so I would be honored to have your vote. My name is Elvin J. Dowling, Dowling for the people. Number 2 on your ballot, number 1 in your hearts. Thank you, God bless you. I look forward to this opportunity.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Emmanuel G Morrell. I remember the days when Black folks couldn't live in Miramar. Yes, that's how long I've lived here. I went to high school in Miami Beach, went to university in Tennessee, and came back to South Florida, became a federal investigator. I was a member of President George H.W. Bush's Commission on Organized Crime, President Barack Obama's Commission on Human Trafficking. I ask you to vote for me because I will tell you the truth 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You may not like it, but it will be the truth, because the truth has always set men free. It is imperative that we tell people the truth. The problem with politicians, the minute they get elected, they disappear. Even their phone numbers change. You can't even reach them. But I will always tell folks the truth. That's my promise to you. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I'm State Representative Bobby Devos. I currently serve as the Democratic leader in the Florida House of Representatives. Prior to that, I served as a city commissioner in the city of Fort Lauderdale for approximately 6 years. At the time, I served as the vice mayor, also the president of the Broward League of Cities. I am a son of Congressional District 20, born to 2 teenage parents, the first in my family to go off and attend college. I graduated from the University of Florida, returned back home to the very community where I started, where I currently live, and I am raising my family. I have 2, as I would say, /5 kids. My 2 sons, Ethan and Jacob, and my wife and I have the honor of raising my wife's sister's kids, Michael, Malik, and Bree, who are now young adults. The reason I am running for Congress, I am currently termed out my current position, and I want to bring my experience. Thank you.
Introduce yourself and why you're running for Congress.
Thank you so much. Okay, yep, you can hear me. So my name is Omari Hardy. I serve currently in the Florida House of Representatives in District 88, which encompasses most of our urban and inner city communities in Palm Beach County. I live up there, I serve up there, but I was born and raised in Broward County, in Lauderdale Manors in Fort Lauderdale, in the same zip code as my good friend, Representative Bobby DuBose, the 33311. Look, we are in a transition period in the history of this nation. We have folks who don't believe in multiracial democracy. We have folks who don't believe that women should have bodily autonomy. We have people who happen to think that things would be a lot better for the country if we just gave away lots of money and tax breaks to the rich. And this division that we see in our country, I don't think it can last. I think that one of us is going to win. And either it will be folks who look like those of us who are in this room, who want poor and working class folk to have access to the ballot, or it'll be the folks who are pushing voter suppression bills. And I think within this context, we need someone who's going to stand up and fight in the United States Congress for working class people and people of color, and that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's transition to the next question. Let me also mention we are streaming live on Miramar website, also AT&T and Comcast. Next question, and great transition from what Mr. Hardy stated earlier. What are your thoughts on Roe versus Wade, and what would you do if elected? It starts from right to left. I'm sorry. Dr. Sharif.
So my thoughts about Roe versus Wade is that we need to protect that at all costs. We've seen that the Texas abortion bill and ban try to stop women from having the right to choose. I think that fundamentally a woman's healthcare rights is a woman's business, and men need to get out of our business. And that means stop trying to legislate our bodies, stop trying to implement laws that invades our privacy and our ability to protect our health. I would support Nancy Pelosi's Women's Protection Healthcare Rights Bill. And I would also say that as a Congresswoman, I think that it is crucial that women have the ability to have screening procedures like mammograms and have access to care. I think for our Black and Brown communities and our women of color, COVID-19 we've seen has affected disproportionately pregnant women. We know that if you are Black or Brown and you have COVID-19 and you get pregnant, that you have a 75% mortality rate and likelihood of being in an ICU on a ventilator. That is serious. There's been a lack of access to care issue for a very long time in our community, and that's why I sat on for 9 years on a national bipartisan health steering committee through the National Association of Counties aimed at fixing the Affordable Care Act, expanding Medicaid through circumventing the 14 states that have refused Medicaid expansion by creating a federally run Medicaid 2, having the FDA negotiate prescription drug costs so that seniors won't have to choose between buying food and paying for prescription drugs.
This is an important question. It's an important issue. I believe that a woman has a right to choose, and I want to protect Roe v. Wade, and I also want to protect Casey versus Planned Parenthood, which was the case that said not only does a woman have a right to choose, but the government can't put undue burdens in the way of her using that right, right? And so I believe that we should pass the Women's Health Protection Act because that would essentially codify Roe and Casey into federal law, but we can't stop there. I think we have to provide positive access to reproductive health care, and that includes abortion care. And so, for example, right now, the Hyde Amendment, which is being discussed in Congress, prohibits Medicaid patients from having the cost of an abortion covered by Medicaid. That has to be repealed. And in addition to that, I think that we should mandate that insurance companies cover the full cost of an abortion, again, at no out-of-pocket cost to the insured. Abortion is a part of health care, and we shouldn't create obstacles to women getting health care because they happen to be women. Here's the other thing. Let's take a step back and recognize why we're even having a conversation about the Women's Health Protection Act. It's because the courts are stacked with conservative ideologues, and Republican-controlled states want to give the conservative Supreme Court an opportunity to overturn Roe v. Wade. And why would a Supreme Court that would overturn Roe v. Wade not overturn the Women's Health Protection Act for the very same reason? I think that the only way to really protect a woman's constitutional right to choose is to, yes, pass the Women's Health Protection Act, and yes, make sure that we provide positive access to abortion care, but we must unpack the court by expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court and counteracting for the fact that President Trump was able to appoint not one but two justices to seats that were stolen from President Obama and also from now President Biden. That's the only way that we're going to really protect a woman's constitutional right to choose, by correcting the imbalance on the court currently.
So I also believe that we have to codify and ensure that abortion is a woman's right. But what I'm hoping will happen with this election, and also when we go into Congress, is that it also pushes us to deal with the health disparities that Black women are feeling every day. We see it not only in abortion, but we also see it when it comes to high childhood and infant mortality rates. We see it also when it comes to discrimination, when women are trying to get scanned for breast cancer, when they're even dealing with endometriosis. There's a lot of specific areas that we see discriminatory practices that hurt Black women and hurt women of color. So this is just a precipice of what we need to do going forward. For the last 10 years, as I've been advocating in Congress, one of the reasons why I was even invited to go to Congress is to talk about the Affordable Health Care Act and how can we ensure that the women and the men in this district are actually having access to health care. But what we saw, it wasn't just the ability to have the Affordable Health Care Act, but we do have to shift to a more inclusive plan, which is Medicaid for all. And we do have to include many more preventative services, including access to contraceptives, including an abortion, and including addressing what's the real issue between why our children who are being born aren't surviving. And that comes to access to prenatal help, that comes to access to after the children are born and gaining developmental access, and that comes with us sitting down and advocating and fighting for a true opportunity of healthcare, a true opportunity to deal with healthcare disparities, and a true opportunity to actually be able to legislate for ourselves as Black women, for ourselves as a community that deals with Medicaid and Medicare and federal funding. And this is what we have to do going forward. My last 10 years of experience writing legislation, writing amendments to include us in it, and using the power of the pen indicates that I know how to balance that budget, because I've dealt with Medicaid budgets over $20 million per year, and us understanding how do we provide health directly to the district and writing it in.
I have never, ever been pregnant. I have never had an abortion. And so frankly, I don't believe it's any of my business, to be clear, without question. I think that as men, we insert ourselves where we should not be. And frankly, we ought to sit down somewhere. And so with regard to what I would do if I'm given the opportunity to serve in Congress, I will fight to make sure that Roe v. Wade is codified into law so that we don't have to keep going back and forth with the states. I would work to pass federal laws to preempt state laws that attempt to limit a woman's right to choose. Now, my colleague to the left, a couple seats over, said, well, there's not much more that we could do than expand the court. Well, there's something else you could do. You could stay and fight. Once a task you have begun, never rest until it's done. Be the labor great or small, do it well or not at all. This coming legislative session, which is perhaps going to be the most consequential legislative session in 10 years, we as a community, hard-fought seats, we will not have those voices in the room. We will not have the gentleman to the left at the table, where we could be fighting against those bills. And so we're leaving ourselves in a lurch while still saying there's nothing more we can do than expand the court. Well, we can actually do what we committed ourselves to do. That's show up and fight in the legislature, not give that power to Ron DeSantis to decide whether or not he's even going to have an election, so that we can have a voice at the table. Because if you're not at the table, believe me, you're on the menu.
If only men would butt out. If only they would butt out. I truly believe in the decision of 1973, Roe v. Wade decision, and I will do my best to keep it that way. Now, let's go further. Why do you believe? I always have to go to the genesis of the problem. The reasons Republicans keep going after this is not because Black women are having abortions. It's because Too many of the white females are having abortions and their numbers are dwindling. Okay? If black folks were the ones having the most abortions, Walgreens, CVS would be performing abortion in every corner. You listen, I came from the beast. I came from the heart of the religious right. I know what they think and I know how they think. There is no difference between the American Taliban and the ones in Afghanistan. They're the same people. They're religious folks who will do anything to impose their beliefs upon everybody else. They don't believe in the US Constitution. They will do anything and everything to destroy this land so they can have their way. And I'm telling you, we need to fight back. If it means expanding the court, let's expand the court, whatever it takes. Because these folks believe that they're doing God's work. That's why they are so dangerous. And we must fight back. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I would definitely support the Women's Health Protection Act. I think that we definitely need to codify Roe v. Wade into law. And listen, I remember arriving in Tallahassee in 2014, and one of the committees that I was assigned to was health quality, and I was a ranking member. And that was always a starting point for these abortion bills. And as much as it's nobody's business, and we talk about men staying out of this, and I agree with that wholeheartedly, but what I saw as well were Republican women trying to tell other women what to do. So let's just be clear on this. This is Republican red meat. This is something that they throw out each year to get us worked up. And I'll tell you, based on my experience, you know, as my colleague to the left of me spoke about not representation, this is an issue that needs to be fought with everyone, regardless of if you're at the table or not. This is a whole community fight. Everyone needs to be engaged, so whether you're elected or not. And that's how we were able to fight these pieces of legislation, working with Planned Parenthood, working not only with our electeds, because they had the votes. This is a larger fight than pushing buttons in the state legislature. This is something we all need to be aware of, we all need to be engaged in. But I would definitely fight and make sure that we codify Roe v. Wade. Thank you.
Thank you for those answers. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is probably doing flips in her casket right now. But we're gonna have the right person in this seat that will fight for us. Next question, we're gonna start with you, Bobby Devos. How will you support the African-American community's voice in Congress? What will be your Black agenda? What does equal justice under the law mean to you? So it's a three-part question. How will you support African-Americans community voice in Congress? What does equal justice under the law mean to you? And what is your Black agenda?
All right, I'll try and address all that in 2 minutes, best I can. So how will I support the Black community, the Black voice? As I have been doing for the past 13 years, the one thing that I will say is that, you know, being the first person in my family to go out to college, I came back to the very community. I still live in the very community that I was raised in, that very heart of community that has every negative statistic attached to it. So my voice is the voice of the people that are there, that are living there. It's not something I have to go get a heartbeat for. I'll continue to do that. I think equal justice is identifying that we live in two Americas. You know, when we deal with whatever the issue may be, voter suppression, we look at immigration, the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, we're looking at two Americas. So how we adjust equal justice is make sure that we have laws in place that apply equally to everyone in this country, regardless of the color of their skin. Look, folks, for me, I am raising 4 young Black men in this 2 Americas. I get up every day with these topics. This is something that I fight for. This is part of the reason why I decided to run for office, so that I can make things better for my kids, these 4 Black men that I have constantly fear about their lives in America. So in equal justice, being a supportive voice, and I didn't catch the third one, I'm sorry, Janelle. But I hope I answered the question.
What does equal justice under the law mean to you?
Equal justice under the law means that the laws apply equally to all that that are affected by the law.
Next.
I'll take equal justice first. As one who was engaged in these types of issues with the federal government, there is no such thing as equal justice. It's an ideal. It's an ideal that we're fighting for, but you and I know that there is no equal justice in America. First of all, when this country was created, it was not created with people like me in mind. So it is an ideal. We're fighting for it. We're trying to create the beloved community, but we are so far from it. We will keep fighting for it, but we're not there. As far as the Black agenda, I have always run on a Black agenda, always, and I will continue to do it, because America owes Black people a debt which she has not paid. I've been saying it from day one. When I ran in 2014 against Ted Deutsch in a 95% white area, I said we needed reparations, and I'm still saying it. Nothing is going to change in 2 years, in 4 years, in 6 years, in 20 or 28 years, just like Alcee Hastings. Nothing changed under Alcee Hastings' leadership. Yes, he meant well. He meant well, but the problems that we Black folks face are systemic. In order to change things, the system must be broken down. We have to go into the system and rip it apart and start over again. Who are we fooling? Until America pays back for 300 years of free labor, nothing's going to change in the Black community. Nothing. It doesn't matter who gets elected, okay? If I get elected, I will fight for it. I will fight for reparations as the starting point. That's the only way, folks. The only way. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. So first, let me just say, with regard to being a voice for the African-American community, I want to be your voice, not just in Congress, but also on local issues. The city of Miramar has issues that they want to take from a legislative perspective to Washington, D.C. And so I want you to hear me, Commissioner Colborn. I want you to hear me, Commissioner Chambers. I want to take your legislative issues to Washington, D.C. Earmarks are back. There are projects that you want to get funded that you may not necessarily want to come out of the city budget. I want to fight for that for you and for this city because you deserve it. I also want to say that with regard to being a voice for Black America and for the Black community, when people show you who they are the first time, you should believe them. To be clear, without question. When Ron DeSantis decided that he did not want this district to have a member of Congress, when Alcee Hastings, a man who I loved with all my heart, when he passed away, DeSantis decided that we shouldn't have a member of Congress. And so he was going to drag out this election as much as he could. I stood up. I'm the only person on this panel that stood up and did something. I sued him in federal court. I forced him to call an election. He didn't want to do it. But sometimes you have to speak truth to power. And so what I am saying to you is this. When people show you who they are the first time, you should believe them. Stand up and stand with people who will stand up and stand for you. I will continue to fight for you every single day if I'm given the opportunity to serve. I will work hard for you every single day, and I'll never let you down. And finally, with regard to equal justice, in my opinion, means that everybody has an equal playing field. I served as Chief of Staff for the National Urban League in Washington, D.C. I understand what fighting for rights is all about, and I will do that if you give me the opportunity to serve.
My initiative or my agenda for the Black community deals directly where Martin Luther King left off, and that's with economic justice. We find that we have been systematically let out of federal contracting, the pay gap, and we've even found it in our access for funding for education with our HBCUs. What my biggest priority is to ensure that we can close the pay gap in our financials is to ensure that everyone has an opportunity at federal contracting, that the means is simplified, where now you can apply and that you can receive it. But also we have to ensure that people who are applying for federal funding, grants, that there is something written in it that says if you're going to be servicing that minority area, you should be living in that minority area. Right now we see most of the funds go to people outside who come into our community and take advantage of our community and do not deliver the services. So it has to be a priority that we have small businesses actually acquiring federal contracts at the same rate as our competitors are, which we don't have right now. The second thing we have to address is the pay gap. It's been proven that minorities do not get paid the same as our other counterparts. We have to make it simplified when it comes to proving discrimination and the pay gap, but we also have to address what are the problems that cause us not to actually get these jobs. One of the things is that they don't let us into the boards. So I have actively been working with a group of women to encourage more Black women, more minorities to get put on boards so they can have an opportunity of actually advancing. In addition to that, we've been working very hard to ensure that there's actually funding for small businesses that can acquire different kinds of contracts. But we can't leave out the regular people. I'm a child of immigrants. I've worked very hard, and I remember working 2 jobs just in high school to make it. And so we have to ensure that the pay rate is fair. $15 is simply not enough. We've seen studies already that said you at least need $19.50. So if we're going to take this seriously about putting our community forward and moving an economic justice plan, we have to deal with our past, and that is exactly what economic justice means to me, is us reconciling our past and building a future. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So look, we were enslaved on this continent for several hundred years. And then when slavery ended, we had about a 100-year period of legalized terrorism against people of color, systemic denial of the access to the ballot, systemic denial of access to home ownership and lending programs that were available to people who were not Black, denial even of our GI benefits. When our Black veterans went across the waters and fought for this country, they came back and did not get the same sort of treatment that others got who were not of color. And for me, when I think about what equal justice must mean within this context, you have to first acknowledge that Black folks were left behind by all of that. And so equal justice doesn't mean simply treating people equally. It means creating opportunities for people of color to catch up, which, by the way, may require what appears to be on its face unequal treatment. There's something unequal about affirmative action, but that's a good thing. There's something unequal about making sure that minorities have a better opportunity and a better access and better training and so on with respect to contracting. There's something on its face unequal about that. But guess what? We are catching up people of color, and that requires an intentional effort. With respect to being a voice for people of color, I think we have to understand this. Because of that historic oppression, we skew disproportionately poor and working class. There are disparities on wealth, health, education, and so on. And so if you have an agenda that is pro-working class people, then you have an agenda that is pro-Black. And with respect to uplifting and empowering people of color, I think we have to focus not just on the Black upper classes. There are marginalized people who are just masses of people who are marginalized, who are earning below minimum wage, and we have to focus on uplifting them as well.
So the first question about African American voice in Congress. I am a African American small business owner. Currently, I've been in business just over 20 years. and provide over 200 jobs to healthcare heroes and professionals like myself throughout Dade and Broward counties. If you're going to start with an African American agenda, you have to start with breaking the cycle of generational poverty, and that means educational opportunities for everyone. That means educational opportunities for parents who want to in the workforce and who want to gain a higher education so they can get a higher paying job. We need to change the access to capital for Black businesses. As a Black business owner, I had a great credit score, but a high debt to income ratio when I started my business. And so I heard the word no a lot. And the SBA guidelines and the industry lending guidelines for capital access for Black businesses is skewed, and it keeps Black businesses from having access to capital. So I will change that in Congress at the table. We need to increase jobs. I'm going to support Biden Build Back America plan because I sat on the MPO for 13 years. I know where the transportation dollars need to go. I sit on the 16 County Coalition for Water Resource Board, which is the same board that Congressman Hastings sat on and Marco Rubio. I know where the water infrastructure money is, and I'm going to get it for this district. We need a better quality of water in the Glades, Riviera, and Royal Palm Beach. They've been plagued with water problems, and it's no coincidence that it's in a lower income area in the district. We say equal justice cannot be unless justice is applied equally to police, standardized policing policies, standardized use of force, legalization of marijuana, civil citation programs, and mandatory diversionary programs to prevent courts from applying justice unequally.
Thank you. Next question, all about health care. Do you believe that all individuals should have access to high quality, affordable health coverage? Why or why not? What would you do to ensure equal health care for all? We'll start with you, Mr. Devos.
Thank you for the question. The simple answer is yes. I think that if nothing else, the pandemic has shown us what the lack of access to affordable health care has, the impact it's had on our community. When the pandemic first started, I lost 5 family members, and it was devastating, and many of them lost because they had pre-existing conditions. And so serving in the Florida legislature, one of the things that we have failed to do is to expand Medicaid under 2 governors while I've been in Tallahassee. And so one of the first things that I would work towards, if it's not accomplished soon, is to create Medicaid expansion program that would go directly to the people in the state, specifically Congressional District 20, without having to depend on the state approval, which, by the way, we have pushed away tens of billions of dollars for healthcare for individuals in the state.
Can I answer this question because I have to?
You ready? Okay. So in order to ensure high quality health care, you have to ensure access for all. In order to do that, we have to have a program that covers every life in the United States. The only way to do that is to capture everyone that can't afford the Affordable Care Act and those that cannot qualify for Medicaid. The only way to do that is by creating a federally run Medicaid 2. We can administer that program through the same people that administer the Medicare program and have insurance for all. As a healthcare provider, I know I can prescribe more medications that will be paid for with less out-of-pocket costs to the patient under the Medicaid program. The Medicare program is broken, however. When the formulary list is very short, when dual medications are not included, when we're talking about treating hypertension, diabetes, when we're talking about pre-cancer or cancer treatments that are for oral chemotherapeutic agents, the formulary list becomes very short. Medicare for All, in addition, creates a problem with reimbursement rates because it sets to decrease the reimbursement rate for nurses by 40%. Nurses have been overworked and underpaid for years, and that is not the solution. And if we're going to implement something like a Medicare for All, we have to tweak the plan so that we can improve it for all citizens that are going to be on that plan. And the last thing, if you want equal coverage for all, then the FDA must negotiate with other countries to decrease the cost of prescription drugs and visit other countries and these drug manufacturers so that we can decrease the cost of drugs here. Thank you. And I'll be leaving.
Is it my turn? Look, Medicare for all is the answer to all of this. It is an idea whose time has come. We must have Medicare for all in this country. One thing that Senator Edward Kennedy said before he died, that he missed the boat on universal health insurance under the Nixon administration. He could not believe that President Nixon had truly offered universal health insurance. It's something that he should have taken advantage of, and he missed the boat. So let us fight now to have Medicare for all in this country, because it is not, and when I say Medicare for all, I really want to see the insurance industry go away. We must wipe them off. They're just destroying this land. Medicare for all would cover everyone, everybody, because you don't realize how far behind we are until you go to Europe. You go to Western Europe, you realize that this country is so far behind when it comes to this issue and numerous other issues. But this issue, we're so far behind. We must have Medicare for all, where everyone is covered. Thank you so much.
Yes, welcome. The question was, do you believe that all individuals should have access to high quality, affordable health coverage? Why or why not? And what would you do to ensure equal health care for all?
Thank you. I apologize for being a little tardy. There was another community meeting in my district, District 9, County, that I had to attend. Certainly Medicare for all is what we need to push forward to today. I think we also need to even go beyond that to ensure that we have expanded coverage for mental illness. And why am I saying this? That's because a lot of people who we have in our jails and our prisons have mental conditions. In Broward County, 47% of the people who are in jail need to take psychotropic drugs. 47%. Policing is not going to solve that problem. Ensuring that people have access to good health care is critically important for our nation. It is important for economic output, because if you're sick, you can't go to work. Also, it's more costly, the system we have now, because we're letting folks utilize our emergency room as primary care. That costs a lot more than preventative medicine, which we must build in our systems also, to ensure that those who may have some underlying conditions, diabetes, hypertension, that they get the care that they need before it gets to where they have to go to an emergency room to be hospitalized. And that was one of the things that Obamacare tried to put in place, preventative medicine. It's come a long way with Obamacare. We need to go the rest of the distance to ensure that everyone has full access to proper health care so we can continue to grow and build our economy. Thank you.
I support Medicare for all. I believe that we ought to expand Medicaid in the great state of Florida. I believe that health care should be a right and not an option. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but that's what I believe. I always get leery when I hear politicians talking about the need to reform healthcare, strengthen healthcare, those kinds of things, and yet they take unknown amounts of money from the pharmaceutical industry. I get leery about that. I get nervous when lobbyists talk about the need for access to affordable care, and then on the other hand say that they wrote the bill to benefit themselves and their companies and their industry. At what point does it become about the people? And so, as a member of Congress, I will urge the Florida legislature, as the good gentleman talked about how the legislature and the governor really just decided he wasn't going to take Medicaid expansion. I will do everything I can to support the legislature in getting Medicaid expansion into the great state of Florida. I will also support a comprehensive health care bill that includes a Medicaid direct coverage option, maternal postpartum coverage, and coverage of returning citizens who get out of prison and they need health care options too. I've written about this. I had the opportunity to write a book this year that was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. It talks about the things that we need to do to help make Black America better. Inside of it, I have 90 policy prescriptions, things that we can do right now. And so I'm not just new to this, I'm true to this. I understand these options, and I will take these issues to the United States Congress and fight on your behalf if you give me the opportunity to serve.
So I think everybody or most people agree with Medicare for all, but what the problem we've been having in Congress and actually moving it is that the budget. If we look at the Medicare for all bill right now, it's approximately 45 pages, and within that, it just expands the Medicare program we have. It doesn't deal with the healthcare budget. Our healthcare budget is huge, but there's reasons for it. We have no preventative healthcare embedded in it. We've seen that other states, such as Maryland, they have took an initiative where they have reduced their healthcare costs by focusing on the two biggest drainers, which is going to be hypertension, high blood pressure, and diabetes. Both of these are preventable, and it's been proven, and both of these can delay. So if we were to actually put forth Medicaid for all, but add to it preventative care for these two, we would find that the budget would be going down, and we can actually have expansion. But in addition to that, we're finding that if we don't have a mental health portal as of right now, being that we're dealing with a pandemic, that these prices are going to continue to escalate. And that's where we find a bigger issue trying to pass it. So what I'm proposing is that we focus on passing Medicare for all, but embedding in it directly a telemedicine portal, which already has been funded. The money has been pushed through already for the coronavirus initiatives, but we tailor it towards people who need medical services when it comes to mental diseases. But in addition to that, we directly deal with bringing down that budget with those two. If we're able to do that, then we can push that Medicare for all, because then the other side has no defense to when we propose it. And so I prioritize budgeting, balancing that budget. I've had experience balancing Medicaid budgets for over 15 years and writing policies that actually do that. So that's what's going to make the difference when we get to Congress, not who just believes in Medicare for all, but who can actually get it across the finish line. And my background of having healthcare experience, legal experience, especially in writing federal policy, will help me get it across the line without any opposition.
So we're the richest country in the world, but nearly 30 million people in this country have no health care. And nearly 20,000 people die each year because they don't have access to care and they end up delaying doctor's visits and so on. And I happen to think that that's an abomination for a country that is as rich as we are. And so I believe that we need a single payer Medicare for all program to ensure not only that everyone has access to care, but to make sure that care is equitable. And you know what I mean by that, when folks talk about expanding Medicaid, look, I will take it if we can't get Medicare for all. When folks talk about a public option, I'll take it if we can't get Medicare for all. But an additional problem that we have is that there is a two-tier system. There is a system of healthcare for people with money, and there's a system of healthcare for people, even if you do have insurance, there's a separate system for you. I have fantastic insurance. I also have a developmental disability that I've been pretty open with in ADHD. When I seek treatment for ADHD, I find that the very best treatment providers are not available to me because they don't take insurance at all. Why is that? Because their clientele, typically with white families from very well-to-do neighborhoods that have no problem paying $400 to $500 a week. for treatment for their child. So they don't deal with the hassle of insurance. And if we were simply to create a public option, many folks would be locked out of some of the best care available. So I don't believe that we should have a two-tier system. I believe that there should be a single payer for healthcare in the United States, just as there is in other countries. Mr. Morrell spoke about Western European countries. I think that's absolutely essential that we have single payer. Here's the other thing. People say Medicare for all is too expensive. It's about $30 trillion over 10 years. That's $3 trillion a year. Currently, we're spending $3.8 trillion a year on healthcare. So folks who say Medicare for all is too expensive should recognize that it would actually save us about $800 billion a year.
Thank you for that. Next question, criminal justice. What is your position on capital punishment? Do you have a plan to reform Florida's prison system, especially for the Black community? And what remedies will you put in place to make the criminal justice system fair on a local, state, and federal level? Again, what is your position on capital punishment? Do you have a plan to reform Florida's prison system, especially in the Black community? And what remedies will you put in place to make the criminal justice system fair on the local, state, and federal level? We're going to begin with you.
Thank you. So look, I oppose the death penalty. Look, when someone is wrongfully convicted and they spend time in prison, you can at least compensate them for their time. There's no going back after someone has been executed. And so out of respect for my own fallibility and for our fallibility as humans, I think that we should not ever give someone a punishment that we can't take away, in addition to the fact that I think it's cruel. With respect to the prison system here in Florida, obviously there's a state-run prison system that needs a lot of work. I think that we need to make some of the jurisprudence around the Eighth Amendment, the cruel and unusual punishment part of the Constitution, that stuff needs to be clarified at a federal level to make sure that when we send someone to be incarcerated, that the punishment does not include anything more than the loss of their freedom. We subject people in prison to unbelievably horrific conditions. And if you don't believe that, look at the death of someone like Darren Rainey, who was in prison simply for drug possession and who was basically boiled to death by the prison guards. And by the way, none of those guards went to prison. None of those guards are prosecuted. I believe one of them is actually an employee of the City of Miami Gardens today. But obviously we need to really clarify the cruel and unusual punishment part of that. With respect to criminal justice, we need to start by limiting the scope of conduct that the criminal code reaches. Let me say that in English. We need to decriminalize things, okay? The criminal code is reaching too much conduct, whether that's drug possession, drug use, and in some case, drug commerce. Cannabis commerce, I think, should be 100% legal. Or even, for example, harder drugs like heroin. Like, look, that is, people have substance abuse disorder. That means that they need health care. They don't need prison. So we start by decriminalizing things. I think we also start by unbundling the police and recognizing that we don't need police officers to be stopping you for rolling a stop sign. We can do that as they do in other countries with unarmed traffic enforcement. We don't need police officers showing up when there's someone with a mental health situation. We need to send someone with a mental health background. So decriminalizing stuff and reducing the scope of policing in our society would make things more fair.
So I believe in eliminating capital punishment. I'm trying to get all your questions. I know you had a lot. You did a good job, Where you got all of it, but I'm wasting my time now. All right, so the next thing I wanted to talk about is how do we reform the prison system? I think the first step in reforming it is actually looking into policing, because what we see is going on, there's a lot of practices in different policing, law enforcement, where they're bringing evidence that shouldn't be even brought in, fabricating evidence. So what I've been calling for for the last 2 years is for us to do a federal audit of all policing systems, even policing within the prisons, so we can identify the bad actors, so we can identify the bad practices, but most importantly, so we can identify the best practices, and then we'll have a systematic way of incorporating it. In addition to that, once we're able to identify the malfeasance of certain policing, then we can start identifying certain cases within those infrastructures. And that's when you'll start seeing the real injustice that goes into prisoning and prison reform. But we have to start with the police, and then we have to look at the cases that are embedded in these police departments that have been imprisoning our children. In addition to that, we have to take a really good look at a hard stance about marijuana convictions. As of right now, we are trying to pass a federal bill to make it legal. At the same time, we have more people in prison for slight marijuana felonies, and we have them in jail. There's no way that we should even tolerate entertaining having any kind of federal marijuana program without releasing our children. So that is very important to me that we start in those capacities, and we ensure that we're looking at policing, we're looking at their practices, we're looking at the evidence they're submitting, the cases that they actually use, and we're releasing anyone who's been convicted of any kind of marijuana charges. Those are the three things I would like to propose. I think I got all your questions. Thank you.
So at the risk of being the turd in the punch bowl, let me just say this. As far as the death penalty is concerned, I believe that it is applied unfairly. I've written about this in my book very extensively, how we have built whole economic systems on the backs of our young Black men, particularly the prison system. But frankly, there's some folk whose crimes are so egregious, and this is my opinion, they deserve the death penalty. To be clear, without question, if you go into Sunset Lakes Elementary and shoot up a school where my kids are, you deserve to die. That's just my opinion. Now, again, I believe that the law is applied unfairly. I think we ought to look at that. But if you ask me an honest question, I'm going to give you an honest answer. Now, with regard to how we can reform law enforcement, I think that there are a number of things that we could do. I have walked a beat as a police officer in New York City. I served as chief of staff for the National Urban League, and I also walked a beat for the 3-2 precinct in Harlem, 3 days a week for 2 years. I understand the divide, but I also believe that we ought to ban chokeholds, period. I believe that police officers ought to turn their cameras on and ought to keep them on as long as you got that uniform on, period. And so I will support measures that, for example, institute oversight accountability boards. We have these, in the state of Florida, we don't even have any oversight boards. Let's be clear about that. And so the police have an opportunity to investigate themselves. Boom, done. We decided what the deal is. I will not tolerate that if you give me the opportunity to serve. I will speak up and out on those issues.
I'm all for criminal justice reform. I support the George Floyd Criminal Justice Reform Act. We have too many people in our prisons in the United States. It's a developed country. We have more people in our prisons than any other. We are locking up and imprisoning the most important asset of human capital. And certainly, it's evidently clear that it's not applied equally our criminal justice system. When you look at the state of Florida, where blacks make up about 17% of the population, yet 47% of the people in our prison system, there's something awfully wrong with that. We must reform our system. So what I've done in Broward County is to put together and pass an ordinance creating the Police and Criminal Justice Review Board. Policing is one aspect, but when you go before a judge, if you're black, according to the Tampa Bay Tribune, you're likely to get a 20% longer sentence if you go in front of someone who's white than someone who's black. Is again awful wrong with that. I expanded the civil citation program, which is a better way for us to do with misdemeanor offenses in Broward County, and that's on our books that we must implement. We also keep people in prison practically way after they've done their time. So ban the box is something that I brought to Broward County and got it passed to ensure that we're not punishing people way beyond the time that they were sentenced to. That's awfully wrong also for us to do something like that. In terms of capital punishment, certain heinous crimes, if you have overwhelming evidence, it's hard for me to say yes, but I can understand the pain and passion that people have if your child is murdered in a school where you see clearly someone committed that crime.
I am against capital punishment. The reason is we've made so many mistakes already. We have actually sent people to the electric chair who were innocent. And that's not something I can live with. I'd rather have folks who committed crimes in prisons instead of killing somebody who might not have committed the crime. So especially those of us Black folks. Police officers in the 80s, we recommended to both the Reagan and the Bush administrations that neo-Nazis were infiltrating the police departments throughout the nation, and they were infiltrating the whole system. So what we called for was to have yearly background checks of all police officers, because there are so many neo-Nazis who have become police officers. That's the reason we're having all these issues. It is not easy. It's going to cost money to do this, but it is necessary because we have to weed these folks out, because they are in there for a sole purpose: to kill Black men. And I've been saying this for years. We've known this. George Floyd, to me, could have been prevented. The insurrection of January 6th could have been prevented. Those folks have infiltrated every aspect of our government. Our lawyers, our doctors, it doesn't matter. Every aspect of the country they've infiltrated into, and we have a serious problem in our hands. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Criminal justice reform is definitely a must. It's something that we have to do. It relates to capital punishment. I think this is the first part of the question. Understand the sensitivity of the reaction to certain heinous crimes, but we've gotten it wrong too many times, and too many times the law is applied differently as it relates to especially Black men. So many times in our history, from Emmett Till to now, we have had many cases, even in Florida with the Groveland Four, where white women have lied and Black men have died. And it's unfortunate that our history still speaks to that today. So we have to be careful with that. We had some legislation where we worked on criminal justice reform this past session. Didn't quite get everything we wanted, but we started moving in the right direction in the state. And one piece of legislation that I worked on that was a part of that was the duty to intervene. And we saw that with George Floyd, where folks just sat there and did not do anything as he lost his life. But now we have codified into law that an officer there would have to intervene and provide medical assistance. I also worked on some other criminal justice reform. Wrongful incarceration compensation bill is something I've been working on. In the state of Florida, we have this clean hand provision, and basically it says if you're wrongfully incarcerated, but you had a prior, whatever it may be, then you were not entitled to compensation. I passed legislation to remove all of the nonviolent offenses, and it's something that I've worked on the whole time there. So I do think that we need very aggressive criminal justice reform, George Floyd Act, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I'll continue to work on the federal level as I did on the state level.
Thank you for those answers. So this wraps up the questions, unless anybody in the audience has a question. Anybody? Great, because I have a question. So You have to work closely with local elected officials. You know, right now, you're running for office, you answer their calls, but when you get into that seat, will you do the same thing? Because every elected official needs to reach out to their Congress if they need something in their city. So the question would be, will you continue to help the local elected officials, number one? And number two is, what is your closing statement? This is the last question. I'll start with you, State Rep. Hardy.
Thank you. So I'm proud to say that no freshman Democrat brought home a single larger appropriation than I did for our local government partners, and I did with $1 million for the Riviera Beach Public Safety Complex, my first legislative session. So I'm responsive to folks serving at the local government level because that's where so much of government unfolds in our everyday life. I mean, Congress is so far away. Obviously, what happens there is so important. But if your local government doesn't take out the trash, as someone who served locally, you hear about it immediately. So of course, I'll continue to be in close touch with folks who are serving at the local level because they are, in a lot of ways, your eyes and ears for your local government issues. Do we go straight into the closing there? Okay, so look, I really think, and I said this earlier, that we're in a pivotal moment in the history of this country, and there's a possibility that some of the questions that are out there about whether we're going to have a multiracial democracy, whether we are going to be able to restructure this economy so that it works for working class people, whether women will continue to have autonomy over their body, and whether or not this generation of women and girls is going to be the first generation in the last 50 years to have fewer rights than their mothers and their grandmothers. These are open questions. The end is still in doubt. And how we answer these questions depend on how those of us who serve act and how we respond to the crisis that we're facing. And we shouldn't be the frog that's sitting in the water that's slowly getting hot. I think we need to understand that we're facing a Republican Party that is attacking everything we hold dear, all the progress that we've won over the last 50 to 60 years, and that we must fight back, and that it's okay to really, really push and engage in sometimes hardball tactics if you're engaging in hardball for justice. And I'm running because I've been that fighter at the local level and at the state level, and I will continue to fight for my constituents in the United States Congress should I be fortunate enough to win this election. So thank you for having me, and thank you for organizing this.
So I believe that the role of a member of Congress is really to provide not only just resources, guidance to all the elected officials, it's a team sport. And so that line of communication starts not even when you're elected, it starts before then. Once you win the primary, what is the plan? What is the goal? What is the vision that every elected official has? And how can I make it happen for you? And that's how I plan on moving forward. That's the same position I've been played as CEO for different entities. What is it you need so I can go and get it and bring it back home? In addition to that, when we talk about this election and what makes it so crucial, a lot of reporters are reporting and newspaper articles are saying that this might be our last generation's opportunity to build generational wealth. That is a very serious issue that we're having, being that our district has been systematically not included into any kind of economic growth opportunities. This is our moment for us to actually enjoy or even attest to having economic justice. And that's why I have prioritized economic justice when it comes for everyone in our district, not just business owners, even though I support small businesses to my core, because that is our legacy in the district and our legacy in time. But in addition to that, families, working families who are trying to recover from COVID. Right now we have the child income tax credit and it only goes to people with children. But in our district where we have 55 and older, 50 being 50% of the district, we must be responsible and write them in also. And that is why I'm proposing an economic stimulus check for everyone who's over 18 who makes less than $75,000. My program is meant to uplift our entire district for us to have a rising tide, and this is the moment for us to do it. When we get into Congress, whoever wins, you have a short window and you have to be able to hit the ground running. There will be another election coming August 2022. You have to have a plan, and I have a solid plan. I spent the last 10 years building relationships with members of Congress, building relationships with other electeds so I can hit the ground running for this moment. I'm the only person in the race who's created over 1,200 jobs and created other relationships with banking institutions to have money flowing, and who's also been able to pay people more than $20 when they said we could not do it. Thank you.
Let me thank you all for this opportunity this evening. My clock started a little early, but I'm gonna keep talking. If ands and buts were candy and nuts, every day would be Christmas. You heard a lot of ifs, ands, and buts tonight. And so what I promise you is that I am not going to sell you wooden nickels. I have in my hand what's called a wooden nickel. And it came into the American lexicon because American politicians were selling people bags of goods. They would make promises that they knew they could not keep. They would turn their backs and walk away. I am promising you, if you give me the opportunity to serve, no corruption, no gimmicks, no more wooden nickels. And so, with regard to your question, will you continue to help local officials? The answer is yes. When COVID-19 hit, as chairman of one of the largest food banks in South Florida, I went to the mayors of Riviera Beach, West Palm Beach, Belle Glade, South Bay, Pahokee, and asked them, how could I help? When government had failed us, because they did, and we have to ask the question, who was running government at the time? I stood up. We had food distributions. We responded to a need. We fed 2 million food insecure families in this area. When we showed up, we meant what we said. We practiced what we preached. Politicians showed up with cameras. We showed up with trucks. I will continue to deliver for you. I will work hard for you every single day. I will never let you down. My name is Elvin J. Dowling. I'm number 2 on your ballot, number 1 in your heart. God bless you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, I'll work with our local elected officials. In fact, most of them probably have my cell phone. As chair of the Broad Black elected officials devising the Broad Black Action Plan and working closely with them, helping many of them get elected to office. One of the reasons why in Miramar, 3 of the 5 electeds here have endorsed me, not only endorsed me, but actively are supporting me and out on the front line campaigning to help me get elected. Should you send me to the US Congress, my goal will be to economically and politically empower our people, strengthening families and households and businesses, creating policies that improve access to opportunities and greater economic outcomes, and working to unify everyone across racial and ethnic lines to accomplish this. Here are the issues that we need to deal with. We need to deal with champion economic development and entrepreneurship, job creation, living wage, selling more of our goods and our services to the rest of the world, supporting local, small, and mid-sized businesses, affordable housing, home ownership, immigration reform, climate change, addressing the climate change issue, healthcare, equity, strengthening Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, education, job training, and employment are critical for us to move our community forward. And criminal justice reform, yes, is essential for us. What have I done? I've worked in Broward County to increase the number of small minority and women-owned businesses to get contracts from 10.25% when I got elected 10 years ago to 44%, representing $136 million. Passing additional homestead exemption for our low-income seniors, $25,000 for those who are low income, $25,000 for those who have lived in their home long-term and at lower income. Ensuring that we have a racial equity task force ordinance where we will start seating and meeting to address the racial inequities that has robbed this country of over $16 trillion in economic output over the last 20 years. We must fix it so we can grow our economy by $5 trillion over the next 5 years, according to City Financial Study. We must get together as a country and improve our lives, improve the lives of our people.
Yes, I will answer the phone calls from local officials until 2 o'clock in the morning. Black women, only 59% of Black women had an informal interaction with their leader at work. And only 25% of Black women had equal access to sponsorship. Black women deserve to be affirmed They earn 62 cents for every dollar earned by a white male. Black women, I see you, you're not alone, and I hear you. Someone said that that I come across as a very angry black man. Yes, they are correct. I'm angry. I've been angry for a long time. But the last 5 years, I've really done everything to me. That November night when Trump was said to be the next president of the United States, I knew what was coming because listen to this. I had been investigating Donald Trump for human trafficking when I left the agency. Donald Trump is a human trafficker. And I'm telling you, in Congress, I promise that I will get him where he belongs. Unless Donald Trump is neutralized, this country is in serious, serious trouble. Hear me out. Nothing we say here will come to pass unless Donald Trump and his minions are neutralized. This country is facing a precipice that people are not paying attention to. I'm Emmanuel G Morrell. Much love to all of you.
Let me start out by saying thank you all for hosting this forum and giving us the opportunity to have this platform. In reference to your first question, absolutely will continue to work with local government and local elected officials. I spent 6 years as a city commissioner, and while there, I served as the president of the Broward League of Cities, which is president of all 31 municipalities in Broward, and I also served on the Florida League of Cities exec board, which was the governing body for over 400 cities. I understand the importance of working on all levels, but local elected officials are the closest to the people. They're the ones that the efforts have the everyday impact. So absolutely, I believe in that. I believe in home rule. I remember serving there and working with my state as well as Congress in Hastings and providing. I will say that my experience on the local level as well as the state level has prepared me to arrive in DC. Currently on the state level, the climate that we have dealt with our legislative session is very similar to DC. We had to fight similar legislation. It's not just in the state of Florida with our anti-protester, voter suppression. This is a national narrative. And so in that time and fighting those very egregious bills that I call Jim Crow 2.0, I was still able to effectively pass legislation that affects some of the most vulnerable in our state, students with disabilities, creating a rare disease advisory council. Rare disease disproportionately affect women and women of color. I lost my mother to one and watched her be misdiagnosed for 18 years. These laws are now codified into law in the state of Florida. So I share that with you to say, I am battle tested. I am ready day one to go fight the fight, but yet still pass key legislation that will affect the constituents of Congressional District 20. I'm State Representative Bobby Devos, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Well, thank you to each and every one of you. On behalf of the National Coalition of Black Women South Palm Beach chapter, we wish each of you luck. May the best man or woman get into this seat, and we expect you to fill these big shoes that we have lost. Alcee Hastings. I want to make a special thank you because this would not have happened without our Vice Mayor, Yvette Coburn. Thank you so much, Vice Mayor, for your help for putting this together. And of course, recognize Commissioner Davis. Hello, Commissioner. Thank you to my chair. Sorry. Thank you to my chair, Desiree, and also, of course, our president of National Coalition of Black Women, which she's not here. She's at a meeting, but I'm here. You have the next best thing. But thank each of you. I appreciate you for coming, and thank you for answering the hard questions we needed to hear.
Thank you.